So if I could first have you introduce yourself.
I'm Alex Norman, and I'm a co-director of ReThinking Greater Long Beach.
I'm Bill Crampon, and the other co-director.
Talk about what is the Long Beach Equity Atlas, Geographical Opportunity. Discuss more about what's in it. Let's begin with the definition of the term Long Beach Equity Access. What does that mean? You want to start, Alex?
Well, it's really an outgrowth of a study that we did 2 years ago and reported in the ethnic disparities in Long Beach. We conducted a study of ethnic disparities because so much information was going on about inequality in society. We wanted to know, what would inequality look like in Long Beach? And we did that study. And when the variables of educational attainment and poverty kept coming up, we decided, what if we map this thing out geographically? And so Bill, who does the heavy lifting in this, really, we divided the area up into geographic areas, and we looked at the demographics, we looked at housing, we looked at crime, we looked at education, all within those areas. And basically what we found is that the correlation between poverty and low educational attainment held up. And that was with data mining. So we went further into mining the data than we did with the ethnic disparities. And that basically is what the Atlas is. It's a mapping of geographic opportunities.
Talk a little bit, Bill, about what went into it. I mean, how did you get these numbers, and how did you start to put this into a map form?
Okay, the two mapping techniques we used. The first one, we divided Long Beach up into geographic areas, which we call there's 9 of them. We would like to make it a little bit different, but we're limited by being restricted to using census tract data because that's where the data's at. So we basically divide the city into 9 specific areas on one side, the geographic areas. Then we also looked at and said, what we also need to do is look at the city in terms of economic conditions. So we divided the city into a social economic index into quintiles for the city, ranging from the top 20% of the social economic track areas in Long Beach down to the lower ones. So we could look at it across both physically and also look at it in terms of social economic areas to see where the differences are, where the similarities, for 2 major purposes. One, to understand the data, know what's going on. The other one is for people who want to have an impact on Long Beach to be able to go in and say, here are the areas where we need to focus if we want to focus on this type of problem.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, because there's a lot of data in there. So how did you break it up in terms of sections? Because if you look at the content page, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff in there. Talk a little bit about what kinds of demographics are in there.
Okay, we first used the American Community Survey, which is put out by the U.S. Department of Census. We used the most recent one, which is the 2014 5-year American Community Survey. It essentially went through and summarized all the major variables that the census collects data on in terms of the demographics, income, employment, age, everything else in the Long Beach area. Second part of it is public safety. The Long Beach Police Departments provide us very extensive data on crime in Long Beach, both in terms of the crimes, the victims, and the arrestees. We took those data and plotted them in the same social economic areas that the census data show in the same geographic areas. And then the third one was public education, where unfortunately we're limited to go by where the students attend school, not where the students live, but focusing on what are the differences across the city in terms of student performance, student enrollments, demographics, etc., for depending on where the child lives in Long Beach, or where the child goes to school in Long Beach.
as I said, there's a lot of data,
Huge amount.
very almost overwhelming. And I guess sort of, going back to the why you produced this, what was your goal? I mean, did you want to get people to walk away, assuming they read it? What did you want them to walk away with?
Well, we've always, with every report, we have issued a clarion call to action. I mean, we expect that somebody's going to do something with this. And so what we wanted people to know was that here is a mapping of geographic opportunity in Long Beach that can be used not just for the next few years, it can be used for years to come, because this can set a context. I mean, it can set a context for the city measuring the progress that they have achieved over the years. It can be used as a baseline for determining how to evaluate progress, and it could be used as a policy document. As a matter of fact, we say in here that one of our recommendations is for a summit of leadership in this community to come together, really discuss these issues, not in terms of who's to blame for them, but what can each of the segments of this community do to improve or address the issue for the city of Long Beach.
Bill, maybe you can start answering this question, and then Alice, you can jump in here. But I was saying earlier that in one section of your introduction, you described Long Beach as a city on the brink of success. What do you mean by that?
You wrote the introduction.
All right, Alice, you can start. Bill, you can jump in.
Well, brink it means that there is a lot of positives about living in Long Beach. One of the reasons we moved to Long Beach was because it was a city of neighborhoods, that it was a large enough urban area that it had all of the problems of an urban area, but it had all of the benefits, a coastline, a performing arts center. Long Beach is really a nice place to live. At the same time, it is a difficult place for those who are not educated or who are poor. So, as Bill often says, there are some kids in North Long Beach who've never seen the ocean. And the only time they see the ocean is when they come to the aquarium, and then there's a big body of water out there. So the brink means that the city can either be successful in its attempt to achieve its vision, or it could not. And that vision, as we understand it, is to be a kind of a Silicon Beach. And there are some challenges there. Challenges to have a ready workforce, challenges to tie in with a major research university. So that brinkmanship is there to say we can go either way. We can fail or we can succeed.
I think that fairly well explains it. I see we have the foundation of a good school system here. We have resources we need. What we need to do is look at, and one of my goals of this report is that people look at it and say, here's where we're doing well. Here's where we have a problem. As a community, can we do to solve it? I will argue much more so now than 10, 15 years ago when I got started on this project. But the Long Beach Unified School District has done on its own about all it can do. The Long Beach Police Department on its own has done all it can do. We need the total community to address the major issues that are brought up here, whether it's crime, whether it's education, to bring it forward. It's not a single institution is to blame, or a single institution can turn it around tomorrow. It's the community can turn it around if they want to, but it requires the interest of the community to say, we need to fix this problem.
Alex, what's been the reaction to the report?
Well, it's been positive in some sense. The foundations have really looked at it. And I understand that a group of local foundations met last week, and one of the board members, Randall Cunningham, who is a vice president for a Union Bank, brought up the issue of the report. He's on the board of the Long Beach Community Foundation. And the foundation executive, Marcel Apley, gave him a copy. And he said at that meeting that he thought that the foundations should really begin to look at this document and do some planning on philanthropy around the document. Beyond that, we've had a lot of, gee, I hate to see you go meetings, like this one.
because this is going to be the last report.
Because it's the last report.
Right.
And so we've had the I-team for the city to have us come and discuss the results and where we might go and how it might fit into their phases. We've had PadNet at Long Beach Cap to do a taping. There's a possibility that the database might be picked up by Cal State Long Beach, although we're holding our breath on that because we failed 4 other times.
Right.
And the Aquarium of the Pacific, Jerry Schubel had us to come and talk with a group that's looking at Belmont Shore. And Bill did a really creative thing about excerpting out the particular area of Belmont Shore that this business group is interested in looking at to get them in sync with climate change. Maybe Bill can talk a bit more about how he did that.
Well, they're looking at the sustainability of Long Beach, and one of the specific areas they're looking at right now is the peninsula and the Belmont Shore area. And they asked me, and we did it. We took out of this the excerpts and pulled out just those specific areas to see what was the social economic conditions, what was the population like, who are we talking about that's going to be affected the forecast is if climate change continues as it is now, the increase in sea level, the peninsula and most of Belmont Shores will not be there 50 to 100 years from now, and they want to know what's the population is going to be impacted by it.
What do you hope comes out of this report? And more importantly, I think, is what can we in the news media do to help?
2 things. One is we hope people will look at it, and although there's way too much data for one person to really comprehend, but they find one thing of interest in it that they find it interesting to focus on, and focus on it, ask questions of community leaders. As far as the media, to do stories, we'd be more than happy to help support additional things, to look at the report.
Yeah, and an atlas, we look at atlas in terms of maps and automobiles. And an automobile atlas really just gives you a variety of interesting trips that you might take. And you might look at this atlas in the same way, that it's a map of some interesting things. Whether you want to take a drive through the public safety part or whether you want to go through the academic performance part, if you're interested in education, you can go to this table of contents and take out of that table specifically something that you're interested in doing. And I would hope that one of the things that the media would do would be to isolate the fact that these 2 critical variables have been identified as contributing to a lot of our social ills. And if we really are interested in solving them, then these are 2 areas that we have to address. Now, whether we address poverty or whether we address education, because I think that if you address one, you address the other.
Right.
My preference would be for education, because I think that children, well, I'm a beneficiary of the civil rights movement. And that means that people 2, 3 generations before me laid the groundwork for what I'm now benefiting from.
Right.
And it seems to me that we have to do the same thing for children in kindergarten, that we have to lay the groundwork for them so that they have a quality of life equally as good or better than the quality of life we have now. So I would hope that the media, as well as the public in general, would be able to focus in on the fact that here are 2 areas where the community as a whole can get involved. And it's not a matter of crime being a police problem or a lack of educational attainment being a school problem. They're community problems.
I want to thank you both very much, and I'm sure we'll be continuing this conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Be more than happy to come back.